FEMA today said the agency has enough funding to handle the response to Hurricanes Milton and Helene. The fact that it has to reassure people about that speaks not just to the weather lately, but also the political climate. That's because in spite of Republican mayors and governors and senators in hurricane-affected states saying otherwise, Donald Trump has been lying again about disaster relief. This weekend, he falsely suggested $750 was all storm victims can expect to get from the government.
They send hundreds of billions of dollars to foreign nations. And you know what they're giving our people? $750. They're offering them $750 to people whose homes have been washed away.
I wanted to point out that $750 is only for immediate needs and only one form of aid among others that the government offers. As we reported on Friday, FEMA now has a webpage set up dedicated to addressing false information and rumors, many of which are being amplified by the former president, who has a much bigger megaphone.
They've given over $1 billion to illegal migrants that came in, and now they have no money for North Carolina, for Georgia, for South Carolina, and Alabama, Tennessee, and Florida. They stole the FEMA money just like they stole it from a bank. Kamala spent all her FEMA money, billions of dollars, on housing for illegal migrants. Almost no money, because they spent it all on illegal migrants. $1 billion was stolen from FEMA. They're missing $1 billion that they gave to migrants coming into our country. The federal government is not being responsive. Kamala wined and dined in San Francisco, and all of the people in North Carolina, no helicopters, no rescue.
So again, both Democratic and Republican elected officials where Helene struck have openly pushed back against these lies. Here's North Carolina Republican Senator Thom Tillis on Sunday.
We could have a discussion about the failure of this administration's border policies and the billions of dollars it's costing, but right now, not yet is it affecting the flow of resources to Western North Carolina.
It is not a factor, to be clear. Okay.
Not at this time.
There's also new reporting that Florida Governor Ron DeSantis refused to take multiple storm-related phone calls from Vice President Harris. He said today he didn't know that she'd called. She had this to say when asked about it late today.
People are in desperate need of support right now, and playing political games with this moment in these crisis situations, these are the height of emergency situations, is just utterly irresponsible, and it is selfish, and it is about political gamesmanship instead of doing the job that you took an oath to do, which is to put the people first.
As the Vice President late today, joining us now, Republican strategist, North Carolinian Doug Heye, also CNN political commentator Alyssa Farah Griffin, who will be making the case against the former president of Pennsylvania this week, but does not endorse either candidate. And CNN's Kristen Holmes in Miami, where he's holding, the former president holding an October 7th commemoration. Alyssa, your reaction to what Trump has been saying?
It's gross, but it's dangerous. Listen, Donald Trump worked directly with FEMA, and I would actually argue that of all the government agencies I've ever worked with, FEMA may be the most effective at executing their job. Pete Gaynor, the former administrator under Donald Trump, was one of the core response efforts behind the COVID response, but also many natural disasters that Donald Trump had to oversee. He knows this information isn't true, and it has real-life consequences on the ground. Volunteers have been depressed because they think that there's not a need or they're not able to get to where they need to be. FEMA's spending resources, as you said, to knock down these lies. And then you have people who desperately need help who are being told there's no help to get when, in fact, there are quite a lot of federal resources out there. And I would just note, America's adversaries love this. This is a field day for Russia and China, who are going to then amplify it on social media ahead of the election to just stoke fear and tear us apart. This is, listen, everything becomes politicized a month out from an election, but this is a step further that I've never really seen something like this when you're dealing with multiple horrible natural disasters at the same time. And it just shows Donald Trump is willing to go so low.
Yeah, I mean, Doug, you're from North Carolina. A lot of your family's still there. I'm wondering what you're hearing from people on the ground about, I mean, are people hearing these lies? Is it impacting things at all?
They sure are. And Anderson, I got a call on Thursday from Congresswoman Virginia Fox, who represents one of the districts most affected by the hurricane, who made it very clear to me that FEMA assured her and other North Carolina members on a call that they have more than enough funds for Helene, that they're good there. And look, you know, clearly some of the media attention wasn't where it should have been last weekend. And certainly, you know, we didn't know the direction of the storm, so some of the resources weren't on the ground there. But when you're spreading disinformation, it means all sorts of agencies. It's not just FEMA, right? It's state agencies. It's the Small Business Administration. It's not just Joe Biden or Donald Trump in this matter. It's a comprehensive federal and state state's effort. What they have to do is then take their eye off the ball to tell people these things are false and then these things are true. This is the news you can rely on and this is what you can't. It takes their eye off the ball and makes it that much harder. And there's also, brass politics in this, as Alyssa mentioned, but it's also stupid politics. The reality is the area of North Carolina that was hit is overwhelmingly Republican. Donald Trump, of the 25 counties that are under emergency declaration, Donald Trump won all of them but 2. There are about 185,000 more Republicans than there are Democrats in this issue, or in that area. So by spreading this misinformation, you're hurting your own voters first. And we know Donald Trump takes his people sort of as a special case. He's damaging them for his own political goods. That's malicious.
Kristen, does the Trump campaign have any explanation for why the former president continues to lie about this response? It's obvious why he does it, and there's obviously a shamelessness, obviously, that he's used to. But, do they have any explanation?
Anderson, forgive me, I'm going to speak quietly because we're in a small room here, but what we're hearing from the campaign is that there's absolutely no change in posture and that they would disagree with what Doug just said about how this impacts his own voters. He is trying to speak to people to use 2 fear tactics that we have seen him use before. 1, blaming the Biden-Harris administration for faults that are happening on the ground in the United States. In this case, it is storm response. And 2, blaming migrants. And in this case, he can actually merge the two, saying that the Biden-Harris administration is using money that is supposed to go towards his supporters in order to pay for migrants. Obviously, we know this is not true. Again, as both Doug and Alyssa just said, these are falsehoods, these are lies. They are not the way things are playing out on the ground. We have heard from Republicans who have said that as well. However, this is something that they plan to continue running on. And just keep in mind, we are now facing another hurricane, so expect to hear this narrative going forward.
Alyssa, it's interesting, that DeSantis is saying, well, I didn't know Vice President Harris had called. I guess you could say there's politics that Vice President Harris wants to be seen as being sort of in command and therefore is calling DeSantis. I don't know if there's a role for her that she needs to be calling him. What do you make of that sort of playing out?
I think everyone's still being afraid of having that Chris Christie hugging Obama moment of embracing, a different political partisan. But the reality is this, I worked for Vice President Pence, and anytime there was a major natural disaster, he would also be calling governors, members of Congress in the areas that were affected. It's not just the president. So yes, she's a candidate, but it's also an entirely appropriate thing for the Vice President of the United States to be doing. And it's a moment for him to rise to the occasion of leadership and show, hurricanes don't choose Republicans or Democrats. This is going to be a whole of government effort. And I would just also note that, especially North Carolina, and we don't even know what damage Milton is going to cause, there is going to be years of rebuilding. There's going to need to be congressional supplementals to pay for this. Those are things that are done on a bipartisan basis. And Donald Trump stoking fear, lying about it now, doesn't exactly bode well for if he is to be reelected, that he's going to assist those areas and that he's not going to let politics affect it and he's going to work across the aisle to get people what they actually need.
It's just such a bummer because, disasters, wars, usually bring people together, brings the country together, brings leaders together, and to, in the midst of this, in this most painful moment, to use people's pain and to try to manipulate it, it just seems particularly egregious. I understand, Doug, that you're also hearing kind of new threads of misinformation that are starting to circulate related to the storm.
We're starting to hear from folks on the ground that the case is being made, is being built, that if Donald Trump somehow loses, or to sort of pre-spin a loss in advance, that the State Board of Elections, the moves that they're making to make it easier for people in these impacted areas to vote, are somehow trying to rig the game, and all the terminology that Trump uses to set this election for Harris. It's not true, but it's just another way. The problem with conspiracy theories, Anderson, is when you debunk one, there's always another one to come along that sort of proves the previous one's case as well. And let me just say very quickly as well, look, whether DeSantis and Biden or Harris talk, and DeSantis worked very well with Biden, the last set of hurricanes that came through. What's more important is, and these are not sexy positions, but your regional small business administration, your regional director is speaking to their state counterpart. The regional FEMA director is speaking to their state counterpart. And that is definitely happening on the ground. And it's why we're seeing the relief efforts now have really ramped up after starting off sort of slowly.
Doug Heye, Alyssa Farah Griffin, Kristen Holmes, thank you.